appreciate everybody coming here tonight. Hopefully you can hear me. Everybody hear me in the back?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, I didn't think I need a microphone. My wife says I don't. I wanted to talk a little bit about technical decisions from the point of view of a business person rather than necessarily a technical person like a CTO or somebody like that. So there are a lot of people here in this audience that have really amazing tech backgrounds, and I can almost guarantee you're going to disagree with some of the things I say. Today I will try not to be too controversial, and I'd love to stick around afterwards and discuss anything, but if you have any questions, I'd appreciate it if you kind of save them for the end, and I'll try to address as many as I can, and hopefully we can get a screen working. Okay, good. So one of the key things we're going to look at is why tech startups fail, and what are some of the factors that have to do with that. Now, if you came here for an answer to how to make them not fail, you're in the wrong meetup, because I don't have that answer. I think most people don't. But I did want to share some of the experience that I've had. I've worked with probably over 100 tech startups, and there we go. All right, works better than that. A little bit over 100 tech startups as the president of Razoyo. Jeannie introduced me as the CEO, which is actually, I guess, true. But I chose, as an LLC, I don't have to have a CEO. And so I get to choose my own title. And when I was a little kid, I told my mom that I was going to grow up and be president. And so I fulfilled my obligation, and here I am with you today. I'll give you a little bit more background personally, and I think maybe that helps. I was encouraged to talk about it. As any good stock of wheat, I grew up in Kansas. I was born there. Oh, you too. Good.
Nebraska.
Okay. Nebraska. So stock of corn, maybe. But I grew up there. But since that time, I've lived in several different states. I started my career, as Jeannie mentioned, in Europe. I graduated from a college called, I got my MBA from Bocconi. So I got in Italy. I got my degree in Italian in the U.S. And people say, why didn't you just do the opposite? But I didn't really figure out what I wanted to do until after I had the Italian degree anyway. So that's how I ended up doing that. About 28 years ago, our family moved to Texas. And our hats have remained hung on the wall. Since that time, we very much are proud to call ourselves Texans, and we consider ourselves as much. Even though I met my wife in Italy, she does not have a Texas accent. She has more of an Italian accent. So as entrepreneurs, and I'm assuming that many of you here are in tech and have become tech entrepreneurs because you want to save the world. And that's your goal. You see something that's wrong, you see the power, on the other hand, of these tools that are available to you, and you want to change something, and you want to make it better. And I think that's a fantastic thing. I think that's kind of what's at the core or the heart of conscious capitalism, is improving lives for as many people as possible through your actions. But unfortunately, chances are you're going to fail. If you look at just some of the stats, 90% of high-tech startups fail. That's just what to expect. In some years, it's actually a little higher than that, but that's a good base point. 75% of startups fail within the first 4 years. And 30 to 40% of the investors don't get a dime back. And we're going to talk about some of those today and why some of these statistics are important. But the why, I don't really have an answer to why, but there have been a number of resources that have kind of categorized the reasons for failure or the types of failure that seem to afflict tech startups. And so I took this from a website called Failery. I don't know if you've ever been on the site Failery, but it is the ultimate boneyard of startups. And they will tell you some of the crazy things that have happened. And when I started researching this topic, because I had that question, I dealt with so many different startups, and I would see some of them just wild successes and others would fail. And so I kind of became obsessed with this idea, okay, why did they fail? I went to that website, and unfortunately I went down a deep rabbit hole and ended up with this talk. But anyway, why do they? So one is market, and you hear a lot of people refer to product market fit, like that's the number one thing. And there's some people, believe it or not, that get involved in startups, and they just really think that everybody wants what they want, and they don't pursue the idea of product market fit enough before they spend all their money, which is the number two type of failure, which is you run out of runway, and runway is just money. Other ones have hiring issues, infighting, or they just can't get the right people, or they have too much churn, and so they can never get enough momentum out of their hiring problems. Sometimes a competitor just comes by and does it better than you do. They have a lot more money, a lot more funding, and they just simply outpace you. In some cases, there's just a poor business plan. There's a lack of thought into how this company is actually going to make money. And when you're in the early years and you have angel funding and all kinds of startup VC money, right, maybe you can get away with that. But at some point, and especially now, right, the investors, they want to know, okay, when am I going to get a return on this investment? And then sometimes it's just poor marketing. You just can never get the word out. So those are some of the things that, some of the different types of failure. If you look at it a little bit closer, you see that some of those types have to do with HR issues, including recruiting tech talent, which can be very challenging, especially if you're not a tech person yourself. And then 6% just fail due to some sort of tech-related problem or another. So there's quite a few, and let's take a look at some of them. I'm going to talk about a couple of companies that I was involved with, and so I have not given their names here. I don't want to embarrass anybody, but one of them, I have 4 C's of founder dream teams. So when I see a dream team, I see they're competent, they have contacts, they have a great concept for their business, and they have cash. You have all 4 of those things, I think you have a pretty good chance of survival in this world. But again, I was involved in this particular, they actually hired us to do their tech work. They did everything right. They had a great market plan. They were using the right technology. They had a fantastic idea to change the game in their industry. But their industry was specialty retailers, and they launched in March of 2020. That was when their site got ready. So you can imagine their clients were all closed. They opened up the first day. It's the only company I've seen that opened up the first day at 0 orders. 0 orders. And that went on for a while because all of these retailers were closed. And in the meantime, there was another heavyweight in the industry that caught on to what they were doing. They reverse engineered their business plan, and by the time retail started recovering, they just simply were outgunned. In fact, the founder, one day we were kind of sitting back at a Starbucks afterwards talking about kind of what happened, and he says, we had an opportunity, it got closed by COVID, and then we were in a gunfight, but we only had a knife on us. So for them, it was really not a chance, or not a question of doing something wrong. It was completely beyond their control. Has anybody here heard of scale factor? You might know about you've heard of Scale Factor. So Scale Factor's been out of business for quite a while now. But they were a company, they were founded in 2014. They raised $105 million in venture capital. And their promise was AI-powered accounting for small businesses. They had done a ton of research on their fit to the market. They had a really great plan, user experience, and product plan. And they launched and took off like crazy. In fact, they really had to throttle how many companies were allowed to use their accounting platform. In the end, they ended up closing the company, and what little money was left went to investors. So what happened with this company? Well, their AI was actually a whole complex full of Filipino accountants in the Philippines. And their front end was basically a form to communicate with the accountants. Now, the accountants were smart, and I would not call their intelligence artificial, but this system just simply could not survive that way. They had a very much of a fake it till you make it strategy, and unfortunately they just never made it. They were founded in Austin, and I actually ran into this company. I was in Austin for a tech event at Capital Factory. I don't know if you've been to one down in Austin. And I accidentally walked into their offices looking for Capital Factory, and I saw this sign on the wall. Very, very interesting company, unfortunately not around with us anymore, and unfortunately they just did not have a strong enough tech plan. Then there was another company that kind of suffered from product market fit. So in other words, they started doing their development work before they really knew how people were going to use their platform. It was a remote B2B messaging platform. They had proprietary technology. They already had a number of large enterprise clients that they were able to pitch through because they serviced another side of their business. Their plan was to scale with e-commerce, to use e-commerce to scale so they could more quickly bring on new customers. And so those of you who are not familiar with WordPress and Magento, we worked at the time, my company Razoyo worked in the Magento world. Magento is essentially an open source platform for e-commerce. And they decided somehow that this is the platform that they wanted to use. They had all these plans on how they were going to modify it. And, but they were used to working in WordPress. And WordPress is, are you familiar with WordPress content management? I would think everybody in this room, right? Content management system, very, very popular, number one in the world. I think something like 7% of all internet traffic goes to WordPress site of some kind or another. It's crazy. But it's much easier to modify a content management system than to change the business processes of an e-commerce platform. But they had equated the two in their minds, and that was their plan. And they showed us their plan, and we said, I don't know if this is going to work, but we'll implement it for you. And unfortunately, it just got to the point where it didn't work because the needs for customization were extremely high. And so the cost was just going through the roof for them. So this one bad technical choice made a difference to them. And in the end, they lacked a coherent technical plan, and they were unable to scale the concept. However, they rethought their plan, and they're extremely successful today. So they were able to recover from a bad technical choice, but they could have easily just sunk from that choice. So one of the things that my clients have learned, and Failery clients have learned as well, is often it takes longer, in fact it almost always takes longer to come up with a product market fit than the entrepreneur expects. And so they don't plan for that extra runway, and the system just comes crashing down on them. Another thing that's kind of interesting is there's this sweet spot of pivoting. We all I hear about pivoting. Oh, we're pivoting on market plan. We're pivoting. Yeah, you're probably familiar with the famous story. Somebody here works for Slack. Right, so you know that it was developed actually as an internal tool. They probably told you this when you started there, right?
Yeah, we sales for the clients, we know the story. It was internal chat tool for the game.
Right. So this was this chat tool then went from just an internal tool. Now it was Plan A, and they're wildly successful, right? And great company. I love their tech. But if you pivot too many times, you build up either technical debt or you just end up wasting money and you spend all of your runway. But if you never pivot, chances are you miss out on the market opportunity that you're trying to pursue in the first place. So one of the mindset that seems to be effective is be flexible, but not too flexible. If you find that you're pivoting too often, chances are you need to rethink your whole plan. If, on the other hand, you're never pivoting, or there's never a bigger opportunity that you can turn your attention toward, you're probably ignoring the marketplace. So keep in mind that you want to be flexible, but not too flexible. And the question is, well, what does this have to do with my tech stack, which was the original thought behind this talk? But let's talk about a tech stack. Now, those of you who have a very technical background here are going to see like 20 things wrong with this. I'm trying to simplify, and be happy to discuss anything during Q&A. But for a SaaS business or any sort of kind of like a web-based business, a tech stack refers to these different layers of the application that you have. So you have this data layer where all your data sits, right? That's your databases, your Postgres, Postgres, SQL. Then you have an application layer, and this is where your business logic is. This is the machine that does things. It moves data around. It calculates things. It serves up images, video, etc. And then between that application layer and the presentation layer, which is what the consumer sees, there is this thing called an API. And some people refer to that as the API layer. And so I'm leaving it in here. But the API is more like just an interface between those top two layers. So if you think of this, in terms of an application, you have a front end over here. Let's say you're trying to make your way to the National Security Agency. You pinch and zoom on your map. That information via the API goes to your application layer, which says, okay, here's the new map, and it keeps outputting, information back to the presentation layer. It may be pulling data from Google Maps API. It may be pulling data from a request database. So, for example, if you want to use the back key, or if you have other places you've gone, right, you've stored that information in this request database. So, data layer, application layer, API, and then what's commonly called the front end or the presentation layer. A team to develop a product like this. I'm going to simplify the structure here. I'm sure you've been involved in teams that are somewhat like this. Those of you here improving, you probably have a very recommended structure. But you have an executive team which has decides on what the markets and the targets are, and they hire a product team which figures out what the features are and what the user experience should be. And then on the other side, we try to make money, so we get these marketing folks, and the marketing folks are the ones that develop the branding and the graphics and the UI, etc. Right? So this is kind of a product and development team. And in the middle of them, we have our project managers, right? And so on this side, and the lines aren't quite this well defined, but on this side, we're working in these back-end languages, Java, PHP, Python, Ruby. We're dealing with databases, including yours. you know, they have server languages like Nginx or Apache, whatever your server, your Microsoft server, if you're in that world. But they're mainly dealing at the application layer and the data layer, and these people are commonly referred to as the back-end developers, right? So then we also have our front-end developers. And our front-end developers, while they are tied to the product team and the UX team, they also have ties to the marketing and branding team. And they work in a whole different world. They use things with things like React, and Vue, and JavaScript. They are experts in HTML and CSS or compiled CSS, SAS, for example. And so these people kind of have an inability to communicate, and things will often get. Has anybody worked with front and back end developers? Have you ever had a bottleneck situation? Okay, good. I'm seeing some confirmation there. Yeah, like this is a really common problem, and this is a problem. This bottleneck is where a lot of companies fail, is they can't overcome this bottleneck, and so it makes them less flexible. It may take forever to develop something. I see some people laughing like they've been through this.
Oh,
yeah. There's kind of this divergence between expectation and reality, and then this is compounded when you hire developers that are inflexible. You hire back-end developers who just want to hand stuff off to the front-end developers, or front-end developers just want to say, look, back-end, just deliver this to the front end and everything will be cool. And those teams, like, they work like this. So I'm sure that if you were to engage with improving, they could probably help you resolve this problem. But this is a really big problem for a lot of companies. And when that bottleneck gets too bad, this is what your project management team looks at. They are dealing with a constant stream of issues that are urgent. In fact, everything is urgent all the time, and nothing is getting done. So, what if I told you we could possibly remove that bottleneck? Now, I'm not going to give you a perfect solution, but I am going to introduce some ideas about how you manage your tech stack, or which tech stack you might want to use that can help you with this. But before we do that, let's go over a real brief history of tech stacks in startups. Before I show my first slide, anybody want to guess which core language I'm going to talk about first?
Java?
Java, right? Okay. So Java, right, is the big king of the web, and it was available in the 90s. It wasn't really designed out of the gates for the web, but the web was, the internet and connectivity and networking was kind of coming along as the language developed, right? If I get any of this wrong, please just hit me up. But there were a lot of things that developers struggled with. So one was, if you've ever worked in Java, you have jar dependency hell, if anybody's ever been to that hell. You had too many options for how to get things done and not enough standards. So you would have this developer over here and this developer over here who were working on the same thing, and they were doing it completely different ways. Hosting was very expensive. In fact, for Java, it's not quite as bad as it was, but it's still a pretty expensive system to host. You had these long development times. They came out, so good on them. They created a front-end templating system, and they wanted it to be all exclusive so that everybody could use it, and it ended up being extremely complex. At least, I've never worked in Java, but this is what Java developers tell me. But it was the king of the 90s startups, right? This was the king of the first internet systems, right? Was Java. Like, I think people kind of recommend that. And then along comes Python, and another Paul, a better looking Paul named Paul Graham, came along and he said he saw these developers working in his startups, and they were tinkering around with this language called Python, and that became kind of exciting to him because the developers liked it because they could work more quickly, they could prototype things pretty quickly, and it was a great language for developers as compared to the other options at the time, right? And so this stack, which was Python on the back end and a framework called Django on the front end, became, honestly, I think thanks to this comment in 2004 from Paul Graham, one of the founders of Y Combinator, excuse me, that he says, oh, that says something about the language. I want to work in Python. He encouraged it, and boy, the language just really exploded among developers. And then what came next? Developers, the next big stack on the scene was Ruby and Rails, and then React kind of came along later, more recently. Now, if you don't know what React is, it's widely used. It's developed by Meta, Facebook.
Google.
What's that?
It's Google.
Oh, sorry, Google. Yes, Meta, Facebook is
Angular.
no.
Angular. Google's Angular.
Sorry,
Other way.
Google's Angular.
Other way.
Now you're all getting me mixed up. Google's Angular. Meta is React.
Basic.
What's that?
Nothing.
Okay. So, yeah, sorry, got me confused. But yes, so Google is Angular, and React is Meta. And Angular is, I'll be honest, I've developed applications in Angular, and I loved it. It's almost not being used anymore, and there's still a few enterprise companies that use it. But it's not nearly as popular as React. React has really gone off the rails. But, and there's some really great startups that were powered by the stack, like Shopify. Shopify was developed on Ruby. What's that?
Ruby on Rails, right? I mean, Shopify.
Shopify is Ruby on Rails. Yeah, not React. Sorry, they have their liquid layouts. It's a different thing. But Ruby on Rails is Shopify. They rapid prototyping. They had for a while, like in the early, teens, whatever, 2000 teens. There was like this almost explosion of excitement about Ruby and Rails, and you would find developers who would literally die on a hill, because they loved Ruby, they loved Rails, they loved what it brought them. That has lessened a little bit. But one of the great things about it is it provided composable building blocks, so you could kind of build applications that were similar and reuse a lot of components better than other languages. And they loved the syntax. So I don't know why that makes such a big difference to developers, but they really love the syntax. But it's very slow under load. In fact, Shopify has a server build that you cannot imagine, right? Because of the number of servers that it takes to power their applications. It can be very difficult to recover from bad decisions down the road. And if we have any programmers in the room, if you have not made a bad decision, raise your hand. I don't see anybody. I can talk to you later. I want you on my team. And it can be really expensive to host it at scale. But we were supposed to be talking about the bottleneck. And none of these languages really help resolve the bottleneck. Now, I'm going to give you an example of a language that we work with a lot because of its ability to help us resolve the bottleneck. I'm not saying this is the only stack that I would use, but if you are in a startup, you're developing a new product, I would encourage you to take a look at this stack. And we'll talk about a couple more later on. It's Elixir and Phoenix Live Views. Anybody heard of Elixir and Phoenix in the room?
Elixir, I know Phoenix.
Right. So Phoenix is the front-end framework for Elixir. So what is really so special about this duo? Well, there are a couple of things. So Elixir was developed by a gentleman named Jose Valim from Brazil, and it's based on Erlang. Anybody here know Erlang? You have to be pretty old to know Erlang is. Sorry, I didn't mean to be offensive. But Erlang is the software that was designed to manage telephone switches by Ericsson. And of course, given that Ericsson, I think they're a Swedish company, right? So they got a lot of phone switches out in the middle of nowhere. And restarting a phone switch that goes down out there in January is a big deal. And so they wanted to make them as fault tolerant as possible. And they kind of came to this decision that, you know, if a call fails, you know, they could call back. That's not that big of a deal if a call fails. If the server goes down and I have to send a tech out there to restart it, that is a big deal. And that kind of reversed to a certain extent because, you know, fault tolerance for large applications and networked applications was thought to be, we've got to get rid of all the faults. And the Erlang guys said, yeah, let's allow faults to crash a process, but not crash the system. And that's what they came up with. So Jose, who developed Elixir on top of this, he realized that people really like Ruby. In fact, he was a Ruby programmer when he came up with Elixir, and he said, oh, I'm going to make the syntax a lot like Ruby's syntax, and people loved it. And so, but it became essentially scalable by default, in part because of its fault tolerance, and also in part because it used all the processors that you had available to it automatically out of the box. So you didn't have to, you know, with PHP, some of these other languages, you have to tell it, hey, you've got 10 processors, use them all. And Elixir, based on the Erlang stack, says, hey, just use them all. So the other thing that addresses the bottleneck was that the front end and the back end use the same language. So instead of having to divide things up, yes, anybody who's working on the front end needs to, you know, have the basics of HTML and CSS. Don't necessarily need to know much about JavaScript, really, if anything. The front end is encapsulated in modules that are built for the back end. So what does that mean? Basically, I can have the same programmer create my application from the back all the way to the front. That's one thing that allows me to do, but the second consequence of that is with this stack, I can now take a front-end developer or a back-end developer, and they can actually communicate with each other because they speak the same language. So it's a very, very powerful idea. It has some other features and that cause it to be very secure. If you're a programmer, it eliminates some critical race conditions that are part of most languages. And so it's very secure by default. Okay, so those of you who may know about, well, what about the fact that not very many developers know Elixir, because it didn't seem like there were a lot in this room. Well, the reality is it's a very quickly growing community. It's quick to learn, and I have multiple success stories of this in my own company. And you need fewer developers to do the same amount of development. There's a famous talk on YouTube about a guy, how he wrote an application in Elixir and it cost him his job because it was so easy to maintain and required so little time that he ended up getting fired of it. So if you're a developer, it might not be for you. Okay, what about the fact that it requires a compiler? And so a compiler is just something that takes like the code that you write out that you can sort of read as a human and makes it into something that the computer can execute but you can't read, which is more, faster for the computer. And so, but it also means that you have fewer runtime errors. It's a very, very fast compiler. In fact, most people compile as they write the code, if you're familiar with that. And then it also relies on processes by design. Going back to that phone call, I set up my application so that when I'm communicating something, even if the communication goes down, I'm going to be able to recover from it, right? And that's, you think about, well, that's the web. I mean, how many times have you gone through a tunnel, or you know, your mobile device goes down, or whatever happens all the time? that these communication channels, WebSockets, etc., they go out. It does use WebSockets, but the developers don't really have to know about them. They're completely abstracted away. And it's a functional language, which a lot of seasoned developers are familiar with object-oriented languages, right? This is a functional language. And it takes them a little while to make the shift, but not very long. My experience, not very long. I think this concern about Elixir is overblown. It's also a concern about some other languages. But you get sort of that mathematical precision of a functional language. It's actually, if you have a junior developer, we found that they will learn Elixir more quickly than they will learn the other languages because there are fewer exceptions, it works better, and it's more intuitive to them. So we have to think about the future, because the future isn't very far off in tech, right? Our experience with Elixir, let me just walk you through a couple of case studies. So we developed a product called Automatic FFL. In fact, our product manager, John Carlos, in the back. If you have any questions afterwards, you can ask him about it. This was our first, so this was several years ago. It was the first time that we had taken a product and we went from ideation, where we figured out the market opportunity and scaled it up and created an application behind it. And we decided to build it on Elixir. It did have a good product market fit, so we weren't going to fall into that trap, but the market was not that big, which is another trap that some folks fall into. But we did pivot on features several different times, and we made it available in app stores for, Shopify doesn't allow you to sell guns, but BigCommerce, Magento, WooCommerce, which is built on WordPress, does. At the time, we didn't have live view, which I was talking about, so we used another functional language that compiles to JavaScript called Elm, because we really fell in love with functional languages. And one of the great things about Elm is if it compiles, it runs, and you don't have to worry about it failing. And then finally, at some point, we're probably going to pivot to Phoenix Live View now that it's available. At the time we did it, Phoenix Live View was not quite ready yet. Now it's fantastic. It is very production ready. So, we quickly became the predominant system for firearm checkout compliance on. Go ahead.
Well, you touched upon the WooCommerce based on WordPress, and from a multi-vendor marketplace standpoint, does sort of the Elixir/Phoenix Review, how well that sort of falls with respect to a multi-vendor setting, a multi-vendor marketplace?
Right. So for this particular application, delivers basically a JavaScript module to the front end. Everything else is developed on our end. So there's no, so we're not worried about conflicting with like PHP, et cetera. It basically delivers this package of JavaScript, for those of you who don't know what it is, this package of JavaScript to the front end that your browser runs, and it's extremely fault tolerant. So that's how we do it. So this particular product has been, in the past 3 years, I say we've had no downtime. Giancarlo, is that?
I don't know of any.
Yeah, you've been working on it for about 3 years. You don't know, we've never had any downtime on it. And our server budget is what, $100 a month? Something like that, maybe less, right? So it proves out the concept. We also, so somebody in here was involved in hotel revenue management. Fernando, are you familiar with Korea?
Yes.
Yeah, so we built Korea Spire. So I don't know if you're familiar with that application, but it's for hotel revenue management. It's for, essentially it ingests updated room prices for hotels every day. So we're dealing with ingesting and deploying new statistics for about 2 terabytes of data every single day. And when we started with Korea, they had an application that was mainly built on SQL. It was for use not by end users, but by consultants who knew how to go in and could use the terminal and use the database directly. But we reduced their server bill, which was about $20,000 at the time per month, to about $2,000. They took that money, they reinvested it into feature development. I'm happy to say they spent the money with us. They didn't have to, but with feature development, and so they were able to quickly leapfrog many of their competitors by this technical choice and by using a stack that allowed them to free up resources that were being used for other things. So for us, like the results kind of speak for themselves. There are other companies that have switched over. Elixir saved Pinterest over $2 million a year in server costs. You might have heard of Pinterest. Discord talks about, well, how do you manage so many different conversations at once? Well, they're basically using a telephone switchboard. And they developed their backend on Elixir. And there are a number of other companies using Elixir out there. One of my favorite is a company called Frame.io. If you're not familiar with them, they were purchased by Adobe. But if you're familiar with Adobe's video tools like Premiere Pro, etc., this is an online version of Premiere Pro that allows people from all across the planet to collaborate on video editing in real time. And they launched in first quarter 2020. And you can imagine how critical they became during the pandemic for all of this video production that was being done, but they couldn't get people together in a room to develop it together. So there's some really amazing things that have been done. WhatsApp uses it, WeChat uses it partly. I spoke to the folks at PepsiCo, because I used to work at PepsiCo, about how they use it. And it's mostly back-end infrastructure, but it speeds up their ability to deliver product. So for them, it's now a supply chain critical language and tech stack. So, like I said, scaling is built in. Deploying it in the cloud is actually really very simple. Developers love it. The security is by default is better than any other web framework out there right now. So I'm specifically talking about web, which is where most SaaS platforms are. It's there's a super fast connection between the back and the front end because it does not transfer HTML files back and forth. It uses WebSockets. And it's extremely robust, meaning you can test it in a lot of different ways. So we really like this stack. I'm not going to say it solves all your problems or you should absolutely use this stack if you're on SaaS or whatever. I'm just saying you should look at the implications of the stack that you choose. It's a huge decision, and it's one that affects everything that you do from then on. So some of the other stacks you've probably heard about, Lambda, using microservices. This is a great way to implement a SaaS product in some cases. We actually have some SaaS products. We don't use Lambda, we use Google's equivalent, which is hosted function. We write ours in Go, but otherwise, it doesn't really matter. Basically, there's no servers involved in those applications. Everything is just hosted on AWS. You may have heard of Rust. You ever heard of Rust? You guys have. You guys teach Rust, right? Yeah, it's a great language It's a great stack. It's very fast. It's especially good for, I guess, like fintech, right? Like that's one of the things that that stack is optimized for. And then Nerves, which is, if anybody here is involved in IoT, Nerves is an IoT stack. I'll tell you my dirty little secret about Nerves. It's actually just Elixir on a small device. So it's, if you have programmers, if you, you know, one of the great advantages of Nerves, if you're using Elixir for your backend and moving data around, the same developers can write the code that goes on your IoT devices. You no longer have to write it in C or, you know, or one of these more, I would say, it's not obscure, but high adventure languages. I guess is the best way to put them. Of course, there are other tech issues that can, you know, determine your success or failure in a SaaS startup. I won't go over all these, but you know, the most important thing I can tell you is to focus on MVPs. Take it a step at a time. Crawl, then walk, then run. That would be the most important thing I think I could say. But the right tech stack can help you be more efficient. It cannot make up for a lack of funds or a poor business plan or bad marketing or poor product market fit. But it can help you overcome a lot of some of the issues that you will struggle with along the way in your startup. So you either get a robust stack or just get out a lighter and set some of your money on fire. And it will have the same effect. Thanks very much for sticking with me. I hope this was useful to you, more maybe as a thought experiment than a how-to. But if you have any questions or you want to talk, like, I mean, I guess we're going to have some Q&A now.
Yeah, today. Go ahead. If you have any other questions, he's got a question first. All right.
So what are your thoughts about JavaScript? Like, because on the backend we can also use Node, and on the front end we can use either React or it's completely similar.
Yeah. So we actually, our first SaaS application we wrote on a Bean stack, so I'm very familiar with writing Node on the back end. And it was good because the application did not need to scale dramatically, and it was pretty like steady state, and it worked really well in that instance. I think you could obviously write some great stuff with it. If you are primarily focused on JavaScript, a lot of, and I'm not saying you're an early programmer, but I'm saying like a lot of early programmers, it allows them to get some experience with the back end, the front end, you know, the syntax is very familiar to them. But it does, at least the research that I followed on it, I've never had this problem, but I haven't launched a highly scalable Node application ever. My understanding is that scalability can be an issue. The other problem I have with Node is its heavy reliance on NPM. So when you're creating, which if you're not familiar, it's called the Node Packet Manager, basically allows you as a developer to type in like install Passport, which is how to sign in and sign out of something, and it just pulls it off the internet, plops it in your application. That system seems to have a lot of security cracks in it that I'm not comfortable. I'm comfortable using some very specific packages, but I think the tendency of developers and what's attractive about it and what helps them move quickly in Node is that they're able to use all these packages, but they create problems for them in the long run. The only maintenance we've had to do on our SaaS application, which is still running, that was written in Node, other than we have to upgrade the Node version once in a while, is replacing packets, and we have to constantly monitor, you know, security issues that come out of the packages that we're using. So I'm not against it. Elixir, by design default, is more scalable, more fault tolerant. I would say you can write, in my experience writing Elixir code, is you write about a third as much code as you would in a Node application.
Well, my question is more on the business side of it rather than the
Yeah.
tech side of it. So if the insight out of this is that Elixir and Phoenix Lightview is the stack to pick and choose from, how can Razoyo dev team help a startup to augment it or
Well, our model is we write the code for you. We've also helped teach companies that we work for how to work in that stack. So we do both, but I would say,
so let's say a hypothetical case, a startup comes to you and say
Mhm.
that you're building this marketplace, right?
yeah.
What are the sort of steps?
So I would say, so if you're building ground up from scratch, okay. Yeah, so then it's a question of, well, let's go into discovery, let's document, everything you want to do, like a standard project, and then we have developers that will write the application.
And they can work in conjunction with the startup developers.
Absolutely. In fact, I would say, I don't know, probably 20% of our clients have internal developers. And I don't want to sound boastful, but I would say they all claim that they are better developers when we're done working with them than when they start. So one of our goals, we realize that our long-term health as a company depends on how successful our clients are, because that's our reputation. And so we will do everything we can to help our clients be more empowered and be able to, more efficiently address the market. Yeah.
How quickly did you get to your first MVP with the client?
For which project?
Yeah.
Let me contrast two. So one was automatic FFL. We were not in the SaaS business. We had not ever built an application all the way when we got into that. By the time we finished it took us a year to do the initial requirements gathering, which is an absurd amount of time, right? It took us a year to do that. And then I would say we were like 3 months, 3 or 4 months, we had an MVP which we could actually deploy to a market. So one of our MVP requirements is it has to be certified. So 3 or 4 months. We've done prototypes in days. In some cases, depending on what the clients want.
Just thought, like when you were mentioning the Spring.io and the other examples
Mhm.
where you had Pinterest. So are these applications more suited for image processing?
So-
Are these Elixir more suitable for image processing, or Frame.io is video processing? Is that where it's more suitable?
So I would say the strength of Elixir is building out the robust data streams that allow collaboration. So I think I didn't build Frame.io, so I don't know exactly what's inside there. My understanding though is that they did use some libraries, and so by the way, these companies, almost all of them use multiple stacks, right? They don't just use Elixir. But Frame.io's front end, which allows for the collaboration of video editors, is all done in Elixir and Live-View. Their back end, I believe some of it, I want to say it's written in Haskell, I'm not sure. But they have to do very, very, very quick video processing. So I think it's either in Rust or Haskell is much of their back end.
And they are purpose-built very differently also, right? I mean, Klarna is a marketplace versus Pinterest and social network versus
Yeah.
Slack. So they are all
Yeah.
super different from our end
Yeah.
application.
The the big thing they have in common is they have, which like the Korea spider, which I showed you for the one we built, is that they have a lot of people generating a lot of data constantly. And so managing those data pipes is something that Elixir is very interested in.
So I think Slack also uses for media files, so I think
Yes.
it's more suited for media and videos and images. I think that's where it actually shines. Alexa actually shines compared to the rest of the technologies.
Yeah, you're right. Because we have the Slack person here. That's what you asked. I have spoken to the folks at Slack before, and they initially started, I think, with video, and they said, "Oh, we're gonna like do all of our media management, in Elixir."
So is this available on all clouds or just Google Cloud?
What's that?
Is this language available only on Google Cloud or is it?
Oh no, you can deploy this language wherever you want. Yeah, we deploy on Google Cloud. That's our like home. Although we actually also have clients on AWS. I don't think Azure supports it.
Azure's pretty,
It's pretty locked down to Microsoft products.
it's ring fenced to a lot of.
Yeah.
Microsoft products.
Yeah. So, but and like we initially we deployed it on our own. We used to manage our own servers in a data center, and we had Elixir applications running on those servers as well. I mean, they're just Nginx servers, but you could deploy it on Apache.
All right, so we'll take the last question here, and then everybody will network more and ask them questions offline. and
Yeah. Just I'll hang out as long as you want.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is more a comment and observation than a question.
Yeah.
So you hit on the main points of why tech startups fail.
Yeah.
But one thing that's not so obvious and don't people like to address because it's more of a chore than having fun playing with the shiny object, particularly the SaaS companies,
Yeah.
is the cybersecurity aspect. The data breach or something like that can bring something down dramatically. So I encourage companies working on SaaS software development or in general to look at the OWASP project,
Mm-hmm.
Organization Web Application of Security Project. It establishes best practices for secure programming in an online environment.
Yeah. OWASP is a fantastic resource.
Yeah.
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 So.
And they use it in FinTech too.
Yep.
They're very strict on that.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. I didn't really touch on security at all.
Yeah.
Because there was just so much. I could
No,
go.
I get it though.
Yeah. And we're gonna have the security, you're doing
Social
social engineering, so a little bit, trying to get people to give their password up.
Did the raffle, where did those
Over
two
here.
things go? Oh, okay, they're there.
All right, thanks very much. I'm gonna hang around.